Hey everybody, so today I'm here to give you guys a 26-week pregnancy update. The weeks are just flying on by and a lot has happened since my last update. So I'm going to try and get through the bits that can be quickly. But yeah, I am 26 weeks pregnant. By the time you're seeing this, I'm probably 27 weeks pregnant. So this will be the last pregnancy update in my second trimester, which is just insane to me because I feel like I was pregnant in my second trimester. Like, the second trimester always feels the longest to me, honestly. It's the first and third that go the fastest. I think I've said that before in like updates with Remy when I was pregnant with her. It's always the first and third that goes super fast for me. So it's just like mind-blowing that the second trimester is going to be over soon. And we're just getting down to like literally the last few months until she's here. And it's crazy how fast time moves, especially when you already have children. It goes even faster. So I'm just trying to enjoy literally every second of it. But yes, I have quite the list for 26-week updates, so let's just go ahead and get started. The first thing on my list is that her movement has gotten so strong. You can definitely feel her movement from the outside most of the time. I guess not every little thing you can feel, obviously, but there's definitely most of the time you can see it, you can feel it, that kind of thing, and that's been really fun. I tried to get Sophie to feel her kick one time, but I'm not sure if Sophie was just pretending that she felt her or if she really did. So I don't know about that, but I know Mark has felt her a ton, although most of the time when Mark puts his hand on my stomach, she calms down, so then she stops kicking and stuff and he can't feel her. But he got to feel her the other night, just like having a rager in my stomach because I don't know what she was doing, but she was having at it. And I'm also getting those kind of movements where she's just moving, you know, like moving her limbs, and you can kind of feel that, or like where if they stick a limb where it's not really supposed to go, it gets real tight and you can feel it and it hurts. And you know, like we're starting to get into more of like sometimes the more painful movements as well, but nevertheless, I love it. It's amazing. By far one of my favorite parts of pregnancy is just feeling them move, because there's nothing quite like that ever again. So kind of with that, obviously it's because she's getting bigger and so is my belly. I feel like at this point you can see that I'm pregnant, or most likely. I mean, I am plus size, so I have already got a stomach, but at this point, like the top of my stomach is also very round and stuff. So I feel like, me personally, I'd probably assume I was pregnant. I would never ask somebody if they were pregnant, but I'd probably make that assumption if I looked at myself. And kind of along with that, I am starting to get like restricted in what I can do mobility wise. And it's just kind of funny because I'll just be trying to do something and I'm like, Mark, like, why is this so hard? And he's just like kind of sits there and wait for me to realize that it's because my belly is growing and it's just becoming more difficult to do things. It's been so long since I've been this pregnant, so it's just kind of getting used to that again and realizing that you can't do everything that you could do with your smaller body. I feel like in general, since the beginning of the pregnancy, I've been out of breath, but it's gotten to the point where like doing the most minute things really seems to put me out of breath. Like, you know, taking the laundry from the dryer and putting it in my room, I'm like out of breath. When I was filming the girls' room tour, when we finished it, I was out of breath. Like, I had to stop and take some good deep breaths and stuff, which is completely normal, and I've had it with every single one of my pregnancies, because at this point my kids tend to love to lodge themselves into my rib cage. I think it's one of those things you don't really understand until you're pregnant, because I know I heard people complain about kids being in their ribs, and I'd be like, oh yeah, like I'm sure they're just up in there chilling. And it's like, the baby's not physically entirely in my rib cage, obviously, but the amount of themselves that they can shove up there really is amazing, honestly. So when people say that, they're not just like exaggerating, they really can get up in there. And with both the girls, I knew when they were born because of the amount I could breathe, like the second it happened. I felt that before I heard them cry, both for the first time. I just looked over at Mark and I was like, they're here, I can breathe. Like, it was that sudden. That's how far up my kids really like to be. So I'm not surprised by this whatsoever, because if she's anything like her sisters, she'll continue to do that as well. Just keep nuzzling her way up there. and I am still pretty exhausted by stuff, but in general, I was thinking about how I've been feeling, and I have been feeling pretty good. Like, I do get exhausted. We are getting to the point where baby's so big that some things are painful and you're experiencing things to do with baby's growth. But honestly, I feel pretty good. You know, my nausea, headaches, stuff like that. Stuff that I was dealing with more in the first, second trimester have gotten better. Even my acne has gotten better at this point. I think the only real trouble I'm having at all is just at bedtime sometimes, but I think that's mostly to do with my fibromyalgia because it's only sometimes, and that's just a game that you play with fibromyalgia, is how bad is it gonna be. So it tends to be at night because at this point I can only lay on my sides to sleep at night, and my hips have always been a huge problem for my fibromyalgia, and now that my belly is bigger, I just feel like it's putting obviously a lot more weight onto my hips. And there have been several nights in a row where I've waken up in the middle of the night and it's excruciating. Like, the worst pain I think I've ever experienced from fibromyalgia. I didn't know it could get this bad, and it's just kind of, it's rough, and it's rough for me to get back to sleep. But like I said, it's only some nights. Like the past couple nights I haven't experienced that whatsoever. I've actually slept really good, and I haven't been any pain during the night or even when I get up. So I think it's heavily to do with my fibromyalgia slowly kind of creeping back up. In the beginning of the pregnancy, it wasn't a problem at all. Actually, it subsided a lot, but now I feel like it's kind of rearing back up again. So that's more probably to do with myself and something that's already like pre-existing than it has to do with the pregnancy. It's probably just aggravated by the weight of my stomach. So I've been thinking about getting some kind of pillow just to go under my stomach to help that. But like I said, it's not every night either. So I guess I'll just see. If it continues to be a thing, I'll probably just get a pillow. The next thing, and kind of like the last thing before I get into like the medical updates that I wanted to mention, was how much the girls have been loving my stomach. They can definitely tell that their sister is in there because they hug and kiss and talk to my stomach so much. It's insane. And normally it's more Sophie, and then Remy will take Sophie's lead, but Sophie is super interested in her sister. She's very talkative about her. She's very, like, I don't know, very engaged with what's going on. So that makes me feel really good. Obviously it'll be a very different story when baby is actually here, but there's just like there's just a really good amount of conversation about Lexi that I feel like it might not be the sudden shock that it probably was to her when she was 1.5, and all of a sudden she's like, oh, there's another person in my house and I have to share this space with her for the rest of my life. But they both talk about, you know, wanting to see Lexi. When is she gonna get here? I hope she's okay. You know, it's stuff like that, because they'll ask me where I'm going if I go to doctor's visits. And fortunately, I normally have like my grandma to watch them, or sometimes they're later and Mark can just stay home with them, stuff like that. So they'll ask where I'm going, and I'll explain, you know, just going to the doctor to check up on Lexi, and, you know, they'll say things like that, and it just, I don't know, it's a completely different experience, and it's so heartwarming now that they can engage with my pregnancy, because like I mentioned before, Sophie was so young with Remy that she really didn't notice, and she would take interest every once in a while, but it wasn't this, like I said, engaged. But she says she wants to help with diapers and bathing her and just anything and everything big sister Sophie wants to help with, which does not surprise me at all, because she's very helpful with the little sister that she has now, Remy. And I think Remy will do pretty well. I think there might be a little bit of jealousy because she has been the baby for a while, but I don't think that it'll be anything crazy. I might come here in a postpartum update and tell you guys entirely otherwise, but yeah, the kids and like their engagement with the pregnancy has been something really amazing, and it's just kind of added to how magical this has all felt. Before I move on to my appointments and stuff like that, I also still have the SPD, or pelvic girdle pain. I will say that most of the time it just is what it is. I don't know how to explain it. Like, the pain is just there, and it's just kind of become my new normal. So I don't really tend to notice it unless I'm going from like sitting on something to standing, or first thing in the morning when I get out of bed, then I'll notice it. Things like that, if we've been in the car for a long time and you stand up, and that's when I tend to notice it the most, because in those moments it gets really bad, but then it kind of subsides and it goes back to what it normally is. But it just is what it is. I've had some people tell me that it can last past pregnancy, and I'm really hoping that that's not the case, because it feels pretty broken down there right now. So I'm really hoping that's not the case and that it subsides, but you know, it is what it is. I'm trying to do what I can about it, and that's all you really can do with the pelvic girdle pain. So I did want to mention that because people have been asking me about how that has been going. As far as my appointments go, my appointments have been going really well. With this round of appointments, I did have to go see my OBGYN for a couple of different reasons, and not my midwife. First of all, my midwife was taking a pretty long vacation, so I probably would have had to see him anyways. But also, we had to talk about tubal ligation, we had to talk about my C-section, we had to talk about some other stuff. So obviously he's going to be my surgeon, or my preferred surgeon, I guess I should say. I can't predict the future, but yeah, you kind of have to have that conversation with your OBGYN. So that is the appointment that I was kind of the most nervous for. I was also going to take my 1-hour glucose at this appointment as well. I'll get into the glucose or sugar test here in a little bit because that's its own thing. But I just kind of wanted to touch on the tubal and also the C-section stuff because I have had a lot of questions. I did want to say before I get started with the tubal stuff that you guys, I think by this point, should probably know that I don't make decisions lightheartedly, especially if they're expensive or they're long-term and stuff like that. Like, I really try to do my due diligence, and obviously this is no exception. It's one of the most important decisions that I feel like you could probably make about your body. So I know some people might feel like I'm not making the right decision, and they can have those feelings, but honestly, that can't be part of the equation when it comes to my decision making. My decision making comes down to what my doctor says risk versus benefits are, what the side effects might be, what is the actual procedure, what it means, talking to my husband about how I feel about it, and getting his perspective on things, and then kind of taking everything, all of that, and trying to decide what's best for myself and for my family. So that's how I came to this conclusion, and I just kind of wanted to put this in there because I'm sure most of you would probably hope that that's how I handled it, but I just wanted to say that just in case. About the tubal, obviously it's something that I've mentioned in the past before, that it was something that we were like 99% sure of. So obviously leading up to it, I needed to get my feelings in order. I needed to talk to Mark, get his perspective, stuff like that. And ever since I had first mentioned a tubal to Mark, which was very early on, very, very early on, I knew that he would support me no matter what. And even though it is my body and I feel I have the right to do what I want, at the same time, I am his wife, and if he wants to have a child, I am the person that he's chosen in the past, and he should come to if he wants a child. So it does matter. It does matter if he wants more kids, if he's, how he feels about things. Regardless of agreeing, disagreeing, understanding each other's viewpoints is very important about everything, especially when you make these big decisions, like huge life decisions. Mark in general is more laid back when it comes to the kids, and he always felt like if we have one kid and that's all we can ever have, then so be it, and if we never had another one, he would be entirely content. And that's great, and I know a lot of people have that perspective, but it's also normal to have feelings of, you know, oh, I envisioned to have this many kids, and it's hard for me to let that go. You have to mourn that kind of loss and the idea that you might not get what you had been thinking that you would get all along. Neither one of those perspectives are right or wrong, and that's the reason why I still wanted to talk to him, because I knew that if I said I want to have a tubal, I'm done, this is it, I knew he'd be 100% down with it, but at the same time, I want his feelings and emotions and I want to understand them. So we talked about it, and of course he was supportive of whatever I wanted to do, but it was a very emotional conversation because he was more worried about myself, because he knows that my perspective is different than his, because he knew that I've wanted 4 kids for such a long time, and that's what I had envisioned for us. And he wants 4 kids too, but he is more okay and accepting and quick to let go of that idea, and he will be 100% content the second that decision is made. Whereas for me, it will take some swallowing, it will take some dealing with, you know, like, not to say that I'm unhappy or ungrateful, but you can, you know, mourn the loss of things. You can be disappointed with how things went and still be grateful for what you have. I think people think it needs to be either or, and that's not the case whatsoever. But the reason why it was specifically an emotional decision for me is because I feel like had things not played out the way they did in 2018, I would not be getting a tubal right now. I didn't ask to have 4 miscarriages before Lexi. I didn't want to have 4 miscarriages before Lexi, but that is the way things happened. And because of those experiences, because of how I feel afterwards, because of the aftermath and what I feel like I've been through and what I'm still, you know, left with, I just cannot do it again. I'm done. And that is something that is really hard to swallow, because it's not something that I would have wanted. It's not something that I think I could have even imagined talking about in the beginning of 2018 before, you know, we started actively trying. I don't think that's something that I ever really envisioned for myself for quite some time. And here we are in a very different point in our lives, and I am. And it's just really hard when it feels like something you didn't ask for keeps coming and taking things away. I feel like reoccurrent pregnancy loss took so much from me, especially in the time of going through it, but I feel like it still takes things. And that's so hard for me because it just doesn't feel fair. You know, like, I just want to keep screaming that it's not fair and I shouldn't be in this position and, you know, all this stuff, but it is what it is. And it is emotional because I think about that stuff and it does make me upset, and it makes me just sad. Sad is the best word that I could use, because it's just not something that I thought I'd be here talking about already. But I am. When I realize it is what it is, and that just because it could have been any different doesn't mean that it is, I realize that I need to take my emotions out of it, and I need to think about it from a this is how it is kind of perspective. And when I think about that, and I think about the emotional toll that took on me, I think about the fact that you are not promised a baby when you start trying for one, that you're not promised that you won't lose so many along the way. All of the emotional, physical, mental toll that it takes on your way there. I cannot do it again. I cannot. I don't think that I would be the best mom and the best wife that I could be to the kids that I already have, to the husband that I have, to the life that we have, if I put myself in this situation to be down that road again. I just don't think it's a good idea. And I know that I don't need to explain my decision to anybody. I know that it's my body and I'm 100% okay with doing what I feel is right with it. But I know that this is something that I've struggled with myself. And I know so many of you have gone through miscarriages, multiple miscarriages. I know that there's so many of you out there that if you're in this position, I wanted you to hear someone who is going through the same thing. Not to say that I think people need to make the same decision as me. There's women who go through 12 losses and they just keep going. You know, there's women who have 1 loss and they just say they're done. There is no right or wrong answer to this. It is very much a personal decision, as it should be. And I just wanted to give you my tiny little perspective on it. I wanted to show you that I'm human too. I have these feelings. I have conflicting feelings. And emotions, and things can get cloudy and messy and stuff like that. So I wanted to put that out there because I know some of you are there. I know some of you are probably dealing with it as well. So that's the reason why I kind of wanted to get more into it. But to make a long story short, my doctor was really great about the tubal conversation. I've seen him for almost a year now, and he has always seemed like a really great guy to me. But I have heard horror stories of doctors when it comes to tubal conversations. I am only currently 25 years old. I have 2 living kids. I've heard horror stories of doctors trying to guilt women into not getting tubals, talking them out of it, not letting them get them, making them go to other surgeons, stuff like that. And as much as he seems like a great guy, I didn't know how this conversation was going to go. And he, again, is such an amazing doctor. He asked me to make sure, because it was just on the chart, that I was interested in a tubal, and I said yes. And that's when he just walked me through everything. I'm so glad that I was fortunate enough to be in that situation where I wasn't made to feel worse about already a difficult decision. So it was just really amazing. And I was really relieved to hear that he actually does tubals standard now, the way that I was going to actually ask him to do. And that is where they actually take a decent portion of your fallopian tube out and not just tie a knot in it or anything like that. He said that actually over the past few years they have been doing more studies, and they think that ovarian cancer might actually start in the fallopian tubes. So because of that reason, he started doing tubals where they take a good section of the fallopian tubes out altogether. So I was kind of relieved by that, just because I didn't want to leave anything in medical device wise. Like, I didn't want to have any kind of stitching left in. So it was really refreshing to hear that he now performs all of his tubals that way. And it just seems to be better for people in the long run. That was a big relief when I had that conversation with him, and that quickly turned into us scheduling my C-section, and I'm so glad we did. It is a little bit earlier than with my other OBGYN. She waited until a lot longer, but I'm glad that we did, because he told me he was only working one day at the hospital that we have to deliver at. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what about if it's like the 1st of August? I'm not gonna have him. And I was freaking out, and it just so happens to be very close to my due date, so that's the date we went with. He's like, you know, you could pick somebody else if you want a different day, you know, if you prefer. And I was like, absolutely not. I want to do it with you. If I don't have you, I'm probably gonna freak out, because I remember in the bustle that is getting ready for a C-section, so many new faces, so many major things happening to you. The one relief that I had was seeing my OBGYN that I knew and trusted, and seeing her always made me feel so much better. So I know seeing him will make me feel better, because they don't allow the significant other into the room until they're basically about to get the baby out. So I don't even have Mark in there with me for a while. And I think that's everything besides the sugar stuff. And the reason why I kind of left this to last is because it is a bit of a story. And if you just want the general gist of it, I failed my 1 hour, I failed my 3 hour, and I have gestational diabetes again. There's the gist of it. If you don't care about anything else really, then you can just click off, because you're just going to see a belly shot at the end, and that's basically the wrap up of the update. But if you care about backstories or how I'm going to manage it and stuff like that, you can stick around. So I did have the 1 hour at the tubal consult, and right then and there they were actually able to tell me that I failed my 1 hour, which I kind of liked, because I knew, oh, I could come back in just a few days and do my 3 hour. Whereas before, I had to wait like a week to get the results, and then I had to wait to be scheduled to see the doctor, and then it just ends up being a long process if you have to wait for results. So anyways, I got back in a few days later. I took my 3 hour, and I failed at my fasting, and I failed at my 1 hour. And honestly, I wasn't surprised by the diagnosis of gestational diabetes. Not that I had any symptoms. That was a question I got a lot on Instagram, was if I was symptomatic, and I wasn't. Fortunately, the times that I've had gestational diabetes, I've never had symptoms of it. I didn't know until I took the sugar test and I failed. But I was just kind of preparing myself for that again. So that's the reason why I say I wasn't really surprised, is I was just kind of like just be ready to fail these and to be diagnosed with it again. And the fasting didn't surprise me either, because that was my problematic number with Remy. That's not something you can do a ton about. You can try and maneuver your bedtime snack a little bit. You can try different things, but honestly, the fasting is more of the placenta and the hormones and your pancreas and insulin demand and stuff like that. So there's not a ton that can be done about it. So when it's off, you can try some things, but honestly, it might just be your body during pregnancy. So this is kind of where the story begins, because this is where things got super emotional for about 4 to 5 days, and I was freaking out, and luckily it ended up not being anything like what I thought it was going to be. I got told I failed my 3-hour by calling and asking my OBGYN's nurse if my results were back. She told me they were and that I had failed, but that the head nurse would be calling me and she would let me know more details about what we're going to do moving forward. Okay. So the next day, the head nurse calls me. I missed her call by just a minute. I called her right back at 9 a.m. because I had questions. She had mentioned referring me to the local hospital, something about a clinic, something about them giving me a sugar meter and all this stuff. And, you know, so I had questions. I didn't understand if this clinic, the place in the hospital, was a practice. Was it a high-risk OB? Would I be getting separate ultrasounds? Would they be doing different stuff on me? I wasn't really sure. I wanted to know what to expect. I still have not got a call back at all, and that was a week and a half ago. The clinic ended up calling me a day later, and they further freaked me out because the person on the phone was like, okay, well, we're gonna have you come in to the clinic on this day and take a class for gestational diabetes. And I said, okay, well, can you explain to me what the clinic is? Because I'm not familiar. You know, this is my first year at this OBGYN practice. This is my first ever experience with you guys, really. And she just zoomed right past that question, didn't even answer it or acknowledge that I even asked a question. And she went straight into asking me to come in a half hour before the class so they could talk to me and so that they could put a sugar meter that would stay in my arm for 2 weeks and continuously every 2 minutes or something like that take my sugar. And as soon as she said that, I was like, whoa, I've never heard of that before. I was like, why is this being done? Like, are my numbers like super crazy horrible and you guys are worried about me? And then she just again went right past that. She did not answer, she did not acknowledge, and she went into, you know, it just gives the doctors a lot of data. It's going to tell them if you need insulin. And I'm like, why are we talking about insulin? Are my numbers crazy? Like, why would you bring up insulin? Why are you saying that? Went right past that into, well, we'll get you a sugar meter and, you know, you're going to still test your sugar. We'll let you know how many times to take it. And I was like, hello, like, I've asked like 5 different questions and you haven't answered any of them. Honestly, this sounds like a lot, and now I'm worried that something's really wrong and that my sugar's really out of control, and just all these things are running through my head like a mile a minute. And she's just like, well, yeah, if you could come in a half hour before, we'll just talk to you then. And she just basically hung up the phone because the appointment had already been set up. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I called Mark immediately and I was hysterical. I thought that my numbers had to be crazy, that like she was in danger, I'm in danger. Like, why are they talking about some meter in my arm? Why are we talking about insulin? Like, I still didn't know if this was a practice. I didn't know if this is a high-risk doctor. I don't know anything. And I was freaking out. And luckily, fortunately, as great as he is, he always knows how to calm me down. So I was calmed down, but this all happened on a Friday. So I wasn't going to go in until Tuesday, and I just had to sit with it for the weekend. And I tried my best not to stress about it, but I was really worried. In the back of my brain, I was pretty stressed out about it. Just the talk of insulin and meters staying in my arm and just all this stuff just seemed like something must be very wrong. Fast forward to Tuesday, and no, it's standard care. First of all, it's just this little clinic that's ran as part of the hospital for anybody with diabetes. It's mostly nurse practitioners, there was a pharmacist, there's a dietitian, there's a lot of just general nurses as well, stuff like that. There's no actual high-risk doctor or anything. It's not a practice, it's just a little clinic, I guess is what they call it, and it's ran by those people, and it's specifically for diabetes, and obviously they treat people who have gestational diabetes, which is diabetes during pregnancy. So then I get into the room with somebody and I realize that it's all standard care. The meter that's on my arm, it did not hurt to go in whatsoever. It doesn't hurt me now. I bump it constantly. I don't hardly ever notice it unless I do bump into something and it's like, oh, I'm still here. But even when I do bump into stuff, it doesn't hurt me at all. And like she said, it's just taking my sugar every 2 minutes so they can see low points, high points, everything in between. And look at all that stuff. I am taking my sugar myself, fasting, and then 2 hours after each meal. And I just realized that everything was standard care. They didn't mention anything about insulin. I said, you know, well, are my numbers crazy? Are they just bad or anything? And they said no. And the reason why the insulin thing freaked me out so much is because with my experience with Remy, I was worried about that as well when I didn't know anything about gestational diabetes. And my high-risk doctor with her told me, we're not even going to talk about that because there's so many steps before insulin in regards to your numbers. Obviously, it can be very different. If your numbers aren't in a good place off the bat, it might not be so many steps before that. But with mine, there were several things to try before getting to insulin. So that's the reason why it did freak me out as bad as it did, because I knew things had to be pretty, you know, serious to be on insulin. So I realized that my numbers are actually pretty decent, that diet control is looking pretty good for me and all this stuff. And I was just like, you know what? I understand everybody has really busy days. Everybody's got something to do, and I understand that. But if each one of those nurses had just taken a little bit more time, just 30-45 seconds out of their day to explain things a little bit more, or to just call me back, it would have made things so much easier on me. I wouldn't have had nearly as much stress as I did. And I just really wish that they would have slowed down a bit and not treated me like I knew exactly what was going on, because I had no idea. I, as you guys know, have been through this before. I went through it for a really long time with Remy. I got diagnosed really early in my pregnancy with her, and I'm pretty familiar with it. So I've been eating the way I'm probably supposed to be. Granted, the dietitian doesn't correct me on anything, and my numbers have been really good, with the exception of my fasting. The first day my fasting was okay, it was within range, but ever since then it's not been in range, which it hasn't been crazy. It's only been like 5 or 6 over, so it's not skyrocketing. But at the same time, I know that probably means that I'll probably be put on that oral medication, and I'm okay with that because it worked with Remy, and regulating your blood sugars is really important for the baby's health, for your health, everything in between. So, you know, it is what it is, but yeah, it was quite the journey to get there. So as of right now, I'm probably looking at diet controlled with probably like a medication right before bed, so I can keep my fasting under control. But I will update you guys in my next update about how the gestational diabetes is going. But the pharmacist, the nurse practitioner, and a couple of the other nurses said that with the numbers from the test and my knowledge about stuff, having gone through it before, it was looking pretty likely that diet control will probably work for me. But of course, if it doesn't, there's, you know, options for you to help you control it. So far, meal-wise, my numbers have been great. I haven't had a single instance of that, which I feel very fortunate for. But that dang fasting. I know this was a really long update, but like I said, a lot happened. A lot of emotional stuff happened. You know, big things happening here. So I wanted to make sure to keep you guys in the loop, of course. So I'm just going to back up the camera, give you guys a bit of a belly shot, and then that'll be it. I'm probably the most awkward person alive to give belly shots. but this is what it's looking like at 26 weeks pregnant. So like I said, I think you probably could tell that I'm pregnant. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But yeah, that is everything for this update. Thank you for sticking around if you watched all of this, and thank you to all of you who do watch all of my pregnancy updates, like as long as they are. But yeah, that's gonna be everything for this update. I accidentally forgot to ask you guys questions on my last pregnancy update for this one, and I also forgot to ask you guys before filming on Instagram or on my community page too. So I don't have any questions, but leave them down below and maybe I'll pick more than 5 next time I do an update. That way I can make up for that. But yeah, leave your questions down below. I'll get to them in my next update. Thank you so much for what I know is already going to be a bunch of supportive comments. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, thanks for watching.